Lung foods. I just want to quickly talk about that. I did mention this somewhere, blog post or somewhere that we wrote recently. White is the colour of the lung. And this is something that I think people in the West struggle with because we're so ingrained to eat like the colours, and especially if you've studied any kind of health or nutrition, it's like that whole conditioning that white is bad.
And you've got outlying kind of people like, Dr. Sebi, these kind of health guru guys, but a bit extreme. But, they're saying like white food's just absolutely void of anything useful. And it gets into you.
Well, yeah. And there's the 4 whites in Chinese medicine that are kind of evil in inverted commas. So, you process white sugars, processed white flours, white salt, like processed white salt, like iodized salt and stuff. And number 4, dairy. They don't love dairy, especially homogenized dairy and that kind of stuff.
Especially it's been processed and it consumed cold a lot of the time.
Yeah. So basically those are to be avoided, especially for healthy lungs. So there is a bit of implication that if you do have a tendency toward a damp spleen and mucus and like lung conditions, that dairy probably isn't a great food for you, unfortunately, because it does really damage the spleen. That's why a lot of people with asthma and those kinds of conditions do better when they take out, well, from a Chinese perspective anyway, that's why they do better when they take out dairy. So those 4 white foods obviously aren't super supportive, but things like rice, fish, potatoes, those lighter coloured foods. And if you're looking at supporting the spleen as well, your pumpkins, your sweet potatoes, that kind of stuff. A lot of the radishes and things are considered supportive of the lungs, like your daikon and that kind of stuff. Chicken. So that's where a lot of these broths and noodles and kind of these really simple, easy to digest meals that, again, culturally we kind of think of as kind of almost unhealthy, or certainly I was conditioned to think of those things as quite unhealthy, but they're actually very easy to digest and they're used as convalescing foods in China and a lot of places. And they are a staple diet.
Can you explain convalescing?
Convalescing is like recovery. So when you look at the healing process, so say you get a cold and let's say it's a bad enough cold that you have to take a couple of days off work and you're pretty run down and you don't feel great, you'll typically turn a corner and you'll start to feel a bit better. And that's when most people resume their normal duties. They just go straight back to it. But if you ever read old books, like I remember when I was a kid reading, Little Women and all of those kind of books from, I guess, I don't even know what era, the 40s maybe. But when people got sick, they would go to the seaside and spend 6 weeks convalescing. If they got polio, they would go to the seaside. And it was this idea that you would have a long period of rest after your illness to recover. And again, in a lot of the older medical systems, this is a really common practice. And it sort of lost favor, I think, in our culture again, because we're also busy and there's lots of stimulants available now. You can go grab a coffee and just push through. And times are different. Obviously, 6 weeks at the seaside, most of us couldn't afford. So, there's lots of cultural reasons these things don't happen anymore. But this idea that we take time to recuperate, it's similar to the kind of convalescing phase after you have a child. You spend 4 weeks inside with your baby just to rest and recover. It's just because your body is still weak and the chance of catching another pathogen or getting sick again when your lungs are weak and your body isn't as strong and the Wei Qi isn't strong are much, much higher. So this is why people at the moment who have weak lungs are being told not to go out and catch coronavirus, because there's a good chance that they won't survive because their bodies aren't strong enough to fight it off.